Hey guys, what is up? Mike here. Thanks for checking out the video. In this video, I want to explain what a UX designer does day to day. Okay, so the question is, what does a UX designer do? This topic came up a few times the last couple of days. I saw two articles on Twitter about this, and somebody shot me an email with some confusion saying, Mike, I know I have to learn HTML and CSS to become a UX designer and so forth. Even at work, people don't really, they're still confused on what a UX designer is. Everyone has their own idea of what a UX designer, does day to day. And I've talked about this in the past. I've explained it, but that was then. Things have changed a little bit. I have a different way of explaining it, and hopefully I can clarify some things for those of you who are interested in becoming a UX designer. Okay, in doing so, I'm going to be explaining a UX designer, what a UX designer is, and the difference between a UX designer and a UX researcher, because there's some confusion there. Two of the articles I saw yesterday, one guy trying to explain what a UX designer is with a banana, using a banana, and then another article titled, what does a UX designer do? I thought this was interesting. I'm like, I'm a UX designer. Let me click on this and see if they got it right. And then I click on the article, and there's a lot of fluff. What I mean by a lot of fluff is it's all the same things that you see all the time. A UX designer does research, and a UX designer creates user personas. A UX designer does this. Listen, all that stuff is right in theory, but it's not how I explain things. It's not truly day-to-day what a UX designer does day-to-day. So here it is. Simply put, a UX designer is essentially a UI designer. Your job, your primary job, is to create mock-ups and deliver them to development, and working with development to seeing them code this stuff and get it through into production. That's simply what your job, that's what your job is about. It's designing mock-ups. Okay, so your primary skill set as a UX designer should be good visual UI design. Okay, so you should be proficient in a UI design tool like Sketch, like Adobe XD, like Photoshop, or whatever, to design mock-ups. And then what goes hand in hand with mock-ups is prototyping. So you need to know how to prototype. Okay, I use Sketch and InVision. You can use that. You can use Adobe XD, which has visual UI design and prototyping all in one. You can use Photoshop and InVision. Doesn't matter, okay? But that is your primary day-to-day duties. Okay, now let me explain a little further. You're essentially, a UX designer is essentially a UI designer. How you get from point A to point B, meaning point A meaning gathering the requirements from a product owner, like them telling you what they want, and then producing a mock-up, is a series of processes and steps that we call the UX design process. Principles, UX design principles, UX design methods, okay? These are all, there's some variables in here because you don't have to use every single one. There's no checks and balances. If you miss a particular step in this UX design process, you don't get a failed product. It's not like coding. It's not like writing a syntax, right? It's not like JavaScript. If you miss a character, the JavaScript won't run, okay? If you miss a character in CSS, you get an error, right? Or the CSS you won't produce anything, okay? This is not like coding, all right? The UX design process is a series of steps and principles and things that's put in place for you to achieve the best result in your mock-up and things that you produce into development and gets coded. Okay, now let me explain a couple of things. I consider myself a UX designer. Before I would say UI UX designer, because I try to combine the two. I'm just going to shorten it and say UX designer. Okay. The most popular term today is called product designer. That's a more fancy term. I don't know who came up with that, but a lot of people are writing with that. Okay, they want to call themselves a product designer. So UX designer, UI designer. I'm even going as far as saying a UI designer today is a UX designer. Okay, so UX designer, UI designer, UI, UX designer, Interaction designer. That's one that Google uses a lot for their UX designers. And then product designer. UX designer, UI designer, UI, UX designer, interaction designer, product designer. These are all the same same person, okay? They have the same duties, and basically their main job is producing mock-ups. Now, somebody would go on record and say, Mike, aren't you creating user experiences instead of mock-ups? Essentially, yes. Okay, but I'll just dumb it down and say mock-ups. The reason why you would say, are you creating experiences, because you might have a collection. Most of the time you have a collection of mock-ups that produces an experience. So for example, if you're building a calendar widget, so you have the calendar and you click on a particular day, or let's just say you're building you know, an interface that allows you to search for hotels and flights. Okay, you have this interface, you type in the airport that you know you're flying out of, then you get a drop down, or you have some date selector and you pick this. So essentially you have one mock-up, and then the next state is you have the drop down showing, and then when you click on one particular option you have another thing that shows. And so when you put these all together, you have an experience, right? So essentially you're building an experience, right? But they're essentially mock-ups, right? You can dumb it down, you can explain it however you want. It's essentially you're designing these mock-ups in these states, and you put them into a prototype, you review them with your product owner and development. Everyone says, yes, let's code this, and then they code it and it goes into production, and it gives the user what they need in order to complete a particular task, okay? That's essentially your job. Now, when I say a UX designer is a UI designer, that's what you are. But when you gain this experience and understand this UX design process, and you apply these methods into what you're designing, in turn it makes you a UX designer, if that makes any sense, okay? So a UI designer is what you do. You're designing user interfaces. But when you apply these UX design principles and methods, in turn it makes you a UX designer. Now, I can't go through the entire list of what's involved in the UX design process. A lot of things, you know, research, and somebody will say, you know, isn't creating user personas and creating user stories and customer journeys and task flows and flow charts and wireframes and user testing, isn't that a part of the UX design process? That is. I can't go through all of that. I'm actually working on a new refined UX design course right now, which is going to go through my entire process that I do as a UX designer, and really speak to you in a real world situation and tell you things that what you need to know on a daily basis and what are optional, right? For example, a lot of these things are optional because based on the product owner that you work with, they may have done a lot of research up front for you. And so they might, when I work with a product owner, they give me, you know, they already know the customer persona, you know, because sometimes I'm asking them, like, I'll give you an example. When I'm walking in the hallway at work, a product owner will reach out to me and say, hey Mike, I need your help on a particular project, this new calendar widget. Can I speak to you after lunch about it? Basically, that product owner is asking me for mock-ups. Okay, they're not saying it, but they're really, my job is to sit down with them, get what they need, and then produce a mock-up. So that they can get it coded into development, right, into production. Now, when I sit down with that product owner, they'll tell me, Mike, we need this calendar widget. We need, users need to be able to click on something and get this date, calendar, pick a date, and go from here and so forth, right? So we have our kickoff meeting, and I asked them, okay, who's using this product? So the product owner, if you're a good product owner, you already have done competitive analysis. You know our competitors, what our competitors are doing. You know who's using this product. You already are defining the user flow and the user stories right then and there. Okay, so they're doing a lot of this UX design, this UX design process for me initially, so that I can hit the ground running and start producing mock-ups for them. Okay, so my job is to produce these mock-ups based on what they're giving me and so forth. Now, if they're not giving me any of that stuff, I have to go out and ask for that information, right? Who's our user? And so I identify and I create these user personas. You know, I create these task flows in my head and so forth. And so, like I just mentioned, in that particular scenario, I don't have to create a wireframe for this person, right? Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't, depending on the lifespan of your product. Is it mature right now where you guys don't need wireframes? You can just go with high fidelity mock-ups right off the bat. You know, so a lot of that stuff varies, okay? Now, when you look at these articles and try to tell you what a UX designer is, a lot of times they'll say, they throw in a lot of stuff that a UX researcher does day to day, okay? So a UX researcher is someone that does customer interviews, usability studies, customer surveys, building out reports, you know, creating these user personas, all this stuff. A UX researcher is someone that does that. Okay, so you have this UX designer, product designer, all these guys over here, same person, and you have a UX researcher over here. UX researchers and UX designers work together. Something like this. So a UX researcher will go out there, they'll come back with a report to the team, to the product team, and say, hey, you know, we studied 12 of our customers over the last 6 weeks, and here's some stuff that we found out. And so they'll give us a report, and they'll share with us, you know, 70% of the customers are getting to the calendar widget by clicking on this link here. 85% of the customers aren't even using the intended widget on the dashboard and so forth, right? And so they are supplying the UX designer and the product team, development team, with information that allows us to produce the correct product, right? To design the correct, the most accurate stuff, okay? So, but a lot of times we work together with UX researchers. What I mean by that is UX researchers would invite UX designers into usability studies, so we're there to observe, right? We're not interacting with the customer, we're just there to observe and be note takers, okay? This is vital I've experienced this. I mean, I love sitting down in usability studies and observing and taking notes and really looking at what the user is doing, right? But it's not my day-to-day job, okay? It's not what I do day to day. This comes about every, maybe once a month or every 6 weeks or something like that, that we're doing a usability study. My day-to-day task is working with product owners and producing mock-ups, all right? So they're two different professions, right? But they're kind of using the same things. UX researchers are doing the heavy work in terms of the research and the analysis and the usability study. UX designers are working with them and identifying their learnings and then applying it into the mock-ups and the designs that we're working on. As I mentioned, a lot of stuff that I talked about here. I'm working on a new course right now, new UX design course. I have the material, just have to lay it out and put it in video format. That's be coming out soon, next several weeks or a couple months here, and I'll let everybody know about that. If you like the things that I talk about, hit the thumbs up button. If you want to learn more about some of the things I do, you have any questions, shoot me an email at my website, mlwebco.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions for you. All right, thanks guys for watching. We'll talk soon. Peace.